All right, ready to dive into some serious brain food. You sent over this research paper and matter, energy, thought, an integrative perspective.
hmm
I got to say, that title alone, it's like, whoa, are we about to unlock the secrets of the universe here?
It's pretty ambitious, that's for sure, trying to bridge the gap between, hard science and those big existential questions we all have.
Exactly. And it looks like we're going to be taking a wild ride through history, philosophy, quantum physics, even neuroscience. So where do we even begin with this? It's a lot.
Well, the paper starts by laying some groundwork. It takes us way back looking at how ancient traditions approached these big questions about reality.
Okay, so back to the wisdom of the ages. I'm always up for a little historical context.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how these ancient ideas, they almost foreshadow some of what modern science is grappling with. Like take Vedanta, for example. It's an ancient Indian philosophy that talks about Brahman, this ultimate reality that everything comes from.
Brahma. So like a universal source code kind of thing.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And what's really interesting is that modern physics is actually searching for something similar, a unified field that underlies all the forces and particles in the universe.
Whoa, hold on. Are we saying ancient mystics were like quantum physicists in disguise or something?
Maybe not literally, but it does make you wonder if they were tapping into some fundamental truths about reality, way ahead of their time.
Okay, that's mind-blowing. But it's not just Vedanta, right? The paper mentions other traditions too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It brings up Taoism, which emphasizes that interplay of opposites, yin and yang.
Oh yeah, the balance.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. This ancient idea, it kind of resonates with concepts in quantum mechanics, like wave-particle duality.
Wait, seriously. Ancient Chinese philosophy and quantum physics. How are those connected?
Well, think about it. In quantum mechanics, particles can be both wave-like and particle-like, depending on how you observe them. It's like they embody both yin and yang, those opposing forces, all in one.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together. It's like ancient wisdom is laying the groundwork for what science is discovering now.
Right. And as we move into Western philosophy, the paper highlights thinkers like Heraclitus. He's famous for saying, everything flows, which aligns with what we see in both modern physics and brain studies. The universe is dynamic, things are always changing.
Everything flows. It's like a cosmic river. I can see how that connects to our ever-changing world. What else?
Well, there's Plato, who proposed the theory of forms. It suggests that true knowledge might exist beyond the physical world, which raises some interesting questions about consciousness, right? Could it exist beyond the brain?
So our thoughts and consciousness, maybe there's something more than just neurons firing. That's a deep one.
Definitely makes you think. And finally, we come to Descartes, who's known for his separation of mind and body. But modern science, it's challenging that view, showing how deeply intertwined the mind and body really are.
It's all starting to connect. From ancient wisdom to the foundations of modern science. I'm ready for the deep dive into quantum physics. Is that where we're headed next?
You got it. That's where things get really, really fascinating. It's like stepping into a different reality almost. The rules are completely different.
Bring on the quantum weirdness. I'm ready to have my reality shaken up a bit.
Okay, well, first let's talk about the quantization of energy. Imagine a staircase, right? You can only be on one step at a time. In the quantum world, energy exists in these discrete packets, like steps on a staircase. It doesn't flow continuously like a ramp.
Okay, I'm picturing those energy stairs now.
Yeah.
But how does that translate to, the real world?
Well, imagine an atom absorbing energy. It's like climbing those energy stairs, jumping up to a higher level or a higher step. When it releases energy, it jumps back down. And these jumps, these discrete energy transitions, they're what give rise to the specific colors of light we see, for example, when fireworks explode.
So those bursts of color are actually atoms hopping between energy levels.
Wow, that's amazing. It is. And this idea of quantized energy, it has big implications for how we understand everything from atoms to, how stars function. But things get even wilder when we talk about wave-particle duality. So particles can actually behave like waves, spreading out like ripples in a pond. But they can also behave like particles, localized in a point in space.
So it's like they have a split personality. They're a wave one minute and a particle the next.
Yeah, kind of like that. The classic example is the double slit experiment. Imagine firing a beam of electrons, tiny particles, at a barrier with two slits in it. You'd expect them to pass through one slit or the other, creating two bands on a screen behind it, right?
Yeah, two slits, two bands. That's logical.
But that's not what happens. What you get is an interference pattern, like the electrons were waves interfering with each other. But here's the kicker. If you try to observe which slit each electron goes through, the interference pattern vanishes, and they act like particles again.
So they're changing their behavior depending on whether or not someone is watching. That's just spooky.
Yeah, it is. It leads to another mind-boggling concept, the uncertainty principle. This basically states that you can never know both the position and momentum of a particle perfectly at the same time. The more you know about one, the less you know about the other.
So there's a fundamental limit to what we can know, like the universe is playing hide and seek with us.
It's kind of like that, yeah. This inherent uncertainty is built into reality at the quantum level. And then we have quantum field theory, which takes things to a whole other level. It proposes that everything we perceive as particles, they're actually excitations of underlying fields, like ripples in a vast cosmic ocean of energy.
Okay, I'm officially lost at sea in this quantum ocean, so it's not just particles, but fields.
Exactly. Think of it this way. The universe isn't empty space with particles just scattered about. It's more like, imagine a giant vibrating drumhead, and particles are the vibrations arising and dissipating within this field.
So everything is connected through these underlying fields. It's starting to sound a bit like those ancient ideas of a unified source we talked about earlier.
Right. It's fascinating how modern physics is kind of circling back to these ancient insights. And speaking of interconnectedness, we can't forget about superposition. A quantum system, it can actually exist in multiple states simultaneously until it's measured. It's like, imagine a coin spinning in the air. It's neither heads nor tails until it lands.
So it's in a state of limbo until it's observed.
Precisely. This leads to all sorts of paradoxical situations, like Schrodinger's cat. We can delve into that later if you'd like.
A cat in limbo. Okay, now I'm really curious. But before we get to that, what else is in this quantum wonderland?
Well, one last concept. It really stretches the imagination. Entanglement. It's like two particles are linked. No matter how far apart they are, you change the state of one, the other changes instantly, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
Spooky action at a distance. Yeah, I can see why. But how does all this quantum weirdness relate to the brain and, our thoughts? That's what I'm really eager to understand.
Great question, and that's exactly where we're headed next. The paper explores how these mind-boggling quantum concepts might actually be at play in the brain. Buckle up.
Okay, I'm ready to connect those quantum dots to the brain. Let's see what this research has to say about matter, energy, and thought.
Well, the paper starts by giving us a little neuroscience 101, reminding us that the brain is an electrochemical wonder. It's a complex network of billions of neurons communicating through electrical and chemical signals.
Okay, Brain 101. I have a feeling we're going to go deeper than just neurons and synapses, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about single neurons firing. It's the networks, forming intricate patterns of activity. That's what gives rise to our thoughts, emotions, behaviors.
So it's all about teamwork in the brain, like a neural symphony.
Exactly. And the paper emphasizes the incredible plasticity of the brain, meaning those neural networks, they're constantly changing and adapting based on our experiences. Every thought, every interaction, every skill we learn, it reshapes the connections in our brains.
Right. Our brains are constantly evolving, which is pretty amazing. But what about consciousness? How does the paper address that big, mysterious elephant in the room?
Well, it dives into some of the latest research using fMRI and EEG. These technologies, they allow us to see the brain in action, see which areas light up during different tasks and mental states.
So we can kind of see the brain thinking, in a sense. But does that really tell us what consciousness
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We're getting closer to understanding the neural correlates of consciousness. But that subjective experience of awareness, it remains a profound mystery.
It's like trying to explain the case of chocolate to someone who's never tasted it, right?
Exactly. But the paper highlights this fascinating piece of the puzzle. It points out that the brain is incredibly energy hungry. It consumes like 20% of the body's total energy. And the way energy is used in the brain, it can tell us a lot about how it functions.
So we're talking about brain energy as a key to understanding consciousness.
That's one of the intriguing avenues of research that the paper explores, how energy flows, how it transforms within the brain, and how this relates to quantum processes. It could offer new insights into the nature of consciousness.
Okay, so we've got this mind-boggling world of quantum physics. We've got this complex energy dance happening in our brains. But how does this play out in the real world? How does it all come together?
Well, that's where things get really exciting. The paper dives into a bunch of fascinating case studies that connect these seemingly disparate worlds of quantum mechanics, brain energy, and human thought.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's explore those case studies and see how these pieces of the puzzle fit together.
All right, so let's start with a study that looked at the effects of meditation on brain energy. Researchers found that experienced meditators, they showed increased alpha wave activity in their brains. Alpha waves are associated with relaxation and focused attention. They also observed enhanced connectivity in a network called the default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN. Isn't that the network that's active when our minds are wandering?
Exactly. And what's interesting is that during meditation, the DMN activity actually quiets down, suggesting a shift from mind wandering to a more focused state of awareness.
So just by meditating, people are literally changing the energy patterns in their brains. That's pretty wild.
It is. It suggests that our thoughts, our intentions, can directly influence the energy dynamics in our brains.
Okay, mind over matter. I think I'm starting to get the bigger picture here.
That's the heart of it. And then there was this other fascinating case study that looked at something called the observer effect in a quantum entanglement experiment. Remember those spooky actions at a distance we talked about?
Yeah, the linked particles.
Right. Well, they found that the act of observing, the conscious act of directing attention, it actually affected the quantum states of the entangled particles.
So are they saying that our thoughts, our observations can actually influence the physical world at the quantum level?
It's one of the mind-blowing interpretations that the paper explores. It suggests that consciousness might not be a passive observer of reality, but an active participant, actually shaping the very fabric of the quantum world.
Whoa, hold on. That's a real game changer. Are there any other examples that kind of tie these ideas together?
Absolutely. Another intriguing case study is about the placebo effect. Remember, the paper discusses how just believing you're getting better can actually trigger real physiological changes in the brain and body, leading to pain relief, reduced inflammation, even improved immune function.
So the power of belief can actually make you better.
It's a testament to the power of the mind, and it further reinforces the idea that our thoughts, our beliefs, our mental states, they can have a profound impact on our physical reality.
Okay, this is all incredibly fascinating, but I'm starting to feel like my brain needs a little break. Where do we go from here?
That's a great place to pause. We've covered a lot of ground here, from ancient wisdom to quantum mysteries and the power of the mind. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the paper's discussion and explore the implications of these findings, for understanding the interconnectedness of, well, everything.
Okay, we're back. And my brain is still buzzing from all those mind-bending concepts we explored in the first part of our deep dive. From ancient wisdom to quantum weirdness and brain energy, it's been a wild ride. So where do we go from here? What does it all mean?
Well, that's where the paper gets even more interesting. It moves into the discussion section and starts connecting all these seemingly disparate pieces. One of the key points it makes is that science, it's increasingly echoing what philosophers and spiritual traditions have been saying for ages, that there's a fundamental interconnectedness to everything in the universe.
So science is catching up with ancient wisdom. That's kind of a beautiful idea. But how does the paper support that, though?
Well, it highlights how those ancient concepts, like Brahman in Vedanta or yin and yang in Taoism, they kind of resonate with some of the most cutting-edge discoveries in physics, like the idea of a unified field, the wave-particle duality of matter. It suggests that these ancient traditions, maybe they were tapping into some deep truths about reality, truths that science is just now starting to understand.
It's like we're rediscovering ancient wisdom through the lens of modern science. But the paper doesn't just stop at theoretical connections, right? It also delves into some real-world examples.
Absolutely. Remember those case studies we talked about? Like the one about meditation, how it affects brain energy patterns?
Yeah, that one was amazing. Just by meditating, people were changing the activity in their brains.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of how these ancient practices, they were once dismissed as woo-woo. Now they're being studied scientifically and showing real measurable effects. It's blurring the lines between science, philosophy, and spirituality.
It's like those boundaries were artificial all along. What I find really exciting, though, is that the paper doesn't just present these findings and then walk away. It actually outlines a roadmap for future research, doesn't it?
You got it. The authors lay out some fascinating directions for future exploration, and they all revolve around this theme of interconnectedness. For starters, more research into quantum neurobiology.
Quantum neurobiology.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out if those mind-bending quantum processes we talked about are actually happening in our brains.
Precisely. It's a relatively new field, but it's incredibly promising. Could quantum entanglement be involved in how neurons communicate? Could quantum superposition explain how our brains process information so efficiently?
Those are some big questions. It makes me wonder if quantum mechanics is at play in the brain. Could that be the key to unlocking the mystery of consciousness?
It's what some researchers believe. The paper also calls for more long-term studies on meditation and its effects. Remember those changes in alpha waves and the default mode network?
Yeah, it seemed like meditation, it really quiets the mind, allows for a more focused state of awareness.
Right. Imagine if we could track those changes over years of practice, really understand how meditation reshapes the brain's structure and function. It could lead to new insights into how we can cultivate well-being, even enhance our cognitive abilities.
That's a fascinating area for research. And I remember the paper also mentioning neurophenomenology. What was that about?
Neurophenomenology is all about bridging that gap between subjective experience and objective data, integrating first-person accounts of, thoughts and feelings with measurements we get from brain scans.
So not just looking at brain activity in isolation, but also taking into account what people are actually experiencing.
Exactly. A more holistic approach, recognizing that both the subjective and objective perspectives are essential.
Makes sense. And speaking of holistic approaches, the paper also suggests further research into the placebo effect, right?
Yes. The placebo effect is a powerful demonstration of that mind-body connection, showing how beliefs and expectations can influence our health. The paper calls for more research into how it actually works, the underlying mechanisms.
So we're not just talking about popping pills, but actually tapping into the power of our own thoughts and beliefs to promote well-being. That's pretty revolutionary.
It is. And finally, the paper doesn't shy away from those bigger ethical and societal implications of all this. If we start to accept that thought can influence matter, that consciousness is this fundamental aspect of the universe, it changes how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos, doesn't it?
Those are some deep questions. It's like we're on the verge of a paradigm shift, a whole new way of understanding reality.
Exactly. That's why this research is so important. It's not just about scientific discoveries, it's about expanding our consciousness, redefining what's possible.
I'm feeling inspired. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, let's bring it back to the paper. What's the main takeaway?
The paper argues that the boundaries between matter, energy, and thought, they're not as clear-cut as we once thought, and that by embracing a more integrative perspective, one that includes science, philosophy, and spirituality, we can gain a deeper understanding of, well, the interconnectedness of all
It's
things.
like breaking down those walls between different disciplines, recognizing that everything is interconnected.
Exactly. And as we continue to explore these connections, who knows what incredible discoveries and insights are waiting for us?
Welcome back to the deep dive. After that last section, I'm really starting to see the world in a whole new light. It's like those old boundaries, between science, philosophy, spirituality, they're starting to blur. And honestly, it's pretty exciting.
I agree. It's like we're finally piecing together a more holistic understanding of reality, recognizing the connections between matter, energy, and thought.
And what's even more exciting is that this paper doesn't just leave us hanging with all these mind-blowing concepts, right? It actually points towards the future.
Yeah.
All these fascinating avenues for research.
Exactly. The authors, they really emphasize that we're just at the beginning of this whole journey of exploration. There's so much more to discover.
So where do we go from here? What are some of the big research questions that this paper inspires?
Well, one thing they suggest is, really diving deep into quantum neurobiology, that field that's trying to figure out if those quantum processes are actually happening in our brains.
So taking those mind-bending ideas from quantum physics, entanglement, superposition, and actually applying them to the brain, that sounds incredibly ambitious.
Oh, it is, but it's also incredibly promising. Imagine if we could actually prove that those spooky actions at a distance, that they're happening between neurons, or that our brains are tapping into quantum superposition to process information.
That would completely change how we understand the brain. It's like we're on the cusp of a whole new era of neuroscience.
Exactly. And then there's the research on meditation, which has already given us some fascinating insights. The paper suggests that we need more long-term studies to really understand how these ancient practices can actually reshape our brains and enhance our well-being.
Yeah, I'm all for more research on meditation. It seems like there's so much potential there.
Absolutely. And speaking of the power of the mind, The paper also calls for more research into the placebo effect. We need to understand how our beliefs and expectations can literally trigger these physiological changes in our bodies.
The placebo effect is just such a powerful example of that mind-body connection. It's like our brains can convince our bodies that something is real, even if it's not.
Precisely. And imagine the possibilities if we could actually harness that power. In a controlled and ethical way, it could revolutionize healthcare.
It really feels like we're moving towards a future where the mind plays a much more active role in shaping our health and well-being. But with all these incredible possibilities, there are also some ethical considerations that we have to think about, right?
Absolutely. And the paper doesn't shy away from those questions. As we delve deeper into the interconnectedness of matter, energy, and thought, we need to consider the consequences, both positive and negative.
It's like we're stepping into uncharted territory.
We need to proceed with both caution and wisdom.
For sure. We need to ask ourselves, how will these discoveries change how we understand ourselves, our place in the universe? What are the implications for our values, our beliefs, even our relationships with each other and the world around us?
These are big questions. And it seems like the answers will require not just scientific research, but also some deep philosophical and ethical reflection.
It's like we're all in this together, co-creating the future.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we continue on this journey of discovery, it's essential to remember that we're not just passive observers, we're active participants. We're shaping the future with our thoughts, our intentions, our actions.
It's both empowering and humbling to realize that, we have such a profound role to play in all of this.
It is. And as this research paper reminds us, the boundaries between matter, energy, and thought, they're far more fluid than we ever imagined.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into matter, energy, thought, and integrative perspective.
Oh,
It's been an incredible journey exploring these mind-blowing concepts, and I think we've all come away with a lot to think about.
definitely. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to connect with.
So, to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this intellectual adventure. Until next time, keep those minds open and those brainwaves buzzing.